How was the reception in terms of when you came into this university? I mean, did you already? The first question would be, did you identify as a trans woman like at that stage? And how was the environment receptive in your residence and yeah, in just the general way in which you experienced your first year here at UCT?
So when I first came into UCT, I was all about this new space being an opportunity for me to really be myself, and basically throw off all the shackles that I had found growing up in a small, conservative town, in a small, unimportant province. Was that when I come to UCT, I'm going to be able to be myself, right? But then as time went by, I felt that actually, even though there's this preconception that Cape Town is, an inclusive, progressive province, and UCT is just so progressive, and there's just hippies everywhere, and everyone loves everybody, I actually started feeling that all those shackles that I thought I'd have to let go when I was within the space, actually factually was still there, and I still had to censor myself in certain respects, even though I did come into the environment already presenting as a woman. And so yeah, that was my first reception of the environment. But of people, it was really varied, and it varied in terms of the spaces that I occupied with certain people. So the way that my reception at my first residence, for example, was different from the reception I got at Rainbow UCT, which was also different from the reception I got from lectures and lecturers and tutors. So I would say it was very varied, but generally there was an air of perhaps understanding, or not really understanding, people not understanding, but then like not wanting to confront that not understanding. So a person will know that, okay, so Sandile is different, right? But I'm a bit scared of asking or inquiring, so yeah.
So you mentioned something very interesting in the sense that all these different entities responded differently to your identity. And one thing that I'm interested in, how did boys, like obviously we're at that age where like most of our friends are going into relationships, but how was that sphere of university? How did that sphere of university life respond to you?
So in terms of dating, I would say that it's been a pretty bitter experience to date, mostly because I feel like trans people aren't really perceived as people, as human beings who are complete, right? Just because our physical sense and physical appearance like dominates so much of our identities, right? The fact that I'm biologically a male, but my gender is female, and my gender expression takes up so much of my identity that's what people only focus on. And that's even true in romantic settings. So I'd find that basically guys that I'd be romantically involved in would be more interested in me in a way that fetishizes me and just basically takes more interest or concentrates more on my physical, right, and wanting to be physical and not really engaging with me as a person, as an intellectual person, as an emotional being, but more as a sexual being. And a lot of that was very patronizing, as you may imagine, right? Because, I mean, for somebody to basically be interested in you in one aspect of your life and totally disregard the rest, not only is telling of their selfishness, but is also telling of how they devalue you as a human being, as a holistic human being. So that's basically been the story about, relationships. And
So the way in which I approached this whole relationship thing, I think for me it was more of I didn't understand. I went from being a woman and realizing that I'm not actually there are certain ways in which I'm differentiated from normal women by men. So for me, I came into this institution thinking that I would be accepted holistically by the queer community and the heterosexual community because I identify as a heterosexual trans woman. But one thing I've noticed is that there has to be a certain level of openness. from the guy's perspective, in the sense that like I had to accept the fact that the man that I do end up being in a relationship with will not be a purely heterosexual male at this point in time, but it will be someone who belongs into the queer community as well. So I would say that in that respect, there's a lot of parallels that I can draw from my own experience in terms of coming into this institution. But although like I'm very glad about that, I think it makes me feel like there is like that place for trans people in this institution that they occupy, and it has to be addressed because clearly it's shared amongst all of us, even though we are pretty diverse.
So, in terms of how I navigate the relationship boarding space right now, I think I've learned how to prioritize myself, to prioritize my body, and to prioritize, my emotions as a human being. And so, I'm okay with saying, actually, I deserve better, right? I'm enough, right? I'm sufficient. I've got enough love surrounding me. I have enough friends. I have enough family to sustain me for a lifetime. And I don't have to make myself, vulnerable to certain situations, just because I feel like it's compulsory. And so I think, that transition, my transition at UCT, basically, with everything that I've experienced, through these 3 years, has brought me to a stage where actually I'm number one, and this number one that I am is enough until I come across something that I think can accommodate my enoughness, and allows my enoughness to flourish.
I think it's about the external pressure. I think that like when, for example, when men like for example, you spoke about that enoughness. Like, I think some men do see that we're enough. I think they do like fall in love with our souls. But it's just that when they go back to their like friends who are heterosexual, it will from a societal point of view, it will make them seem as if they're gay. So I think that is more of a community issue, like the issue of trans women being seen as homosexuals that want to become women, like instead of like a thing of this is a woman, but this is a woman with a different narrative. Like, I think if that was the starting point, so many of these problems wouldn't be there. Like, then we wouldn't have like all these external pressures on, like, for example, like I was walking with another male counterpart of mine, and then like call a male Bay. I was walking with Bay, and then as I was walking with him, greeting some of my friends, people were like, "Do you know that that's a man? Like, do you know that is actually a man?" Like, and then it just shows you how much of our identity is sort of consumed by the impressions and stereotypes that people have. And I think it also consumes our relationships as well with our one-on-one relationships with people. I think it becomes a communal relationship where people can just add in their own opinions. Like, whereas it's a very intimate space and it's private, and we could argue that it's none of their business.
I think one of the dilemmas of having, I hate the term, of having passing privilege, right? Even though it's a privilege, I do think that the dilemma of it is that when you first encounter people, most of the times they think you're a cis woman, right? And so they approach you within a context of you being a cis woman, right? So the way that I've approached those situations, first of all, is that my first assessment is whether that person is whether that's a safe space for me to share something like that from the word go, right? If I feel that it's not a safe space for me to share that with that person when I first meet them, then I won't share it. And that's where our encounter ends. I won't take it further with them. Unless, of course, it's somebody who knows a friend, and then we'll obviously, interact more because of the mutual friend. But if it's just some person that I'm meeting in a club, that I'm meeting in a shop, right, and I feel that it's actually not a safe space for me to share that, not only in terms of guarding myself emotionally to their possible reaction, but also guarding myself, and this in South Africa is such a reality, guarding myself physically, because we know that, trans black people in South Africa are under attack, and I don't want to make myself, vulnerable to such a situation by jumping in and revealing something so intricate and so sensitive about my identity.
I'm in SRC, and here I am, putting myself out there in order to educate people, in order to sort of advocate for the LGBTI community. But we live in South Africa, and South Africa has a lot of issues. There's women's issues, there's race issues, and I think by people annihilating us and not engaging with us, on a basic level of relationship, of friendships, I think we are also our contribution to the biggest struggles of South Africa. I mean, we have to acknowledge that we have a long way to go as a country, but yet we are annihilating so many people that could add value to this political struggle. So my thing is that we need to start seeing people that are misunderstood, not just trans women, people that people are a bit apprehensive to engage. We need to start seeing them as humans. And then we need to start listening to what they're saying and contextualizing it within our own lives. And I think that is the perfect way forward. If we could just unite as people, and for us to unite, we have to engage with such issues, and trans issues are just one aspect of it. There are many other issues that come with heteronormativity, that come with the gender binary, that annihilate so many other people that are silenced essentially. So we live in this world where we can just ignore these people and not engage with them, and yet we are trying to solve some of the problems that this country is facing without realizing that even in that context we are annihilating people.
It's important that as a collective, as a human collective, we realize that nobody in this world lives a single story life, right? We all exist within a complicated network of intersecting identities and realities. And in order for us to be better as a people, we need to be dealing with them simultaneously. Right, and I know that on a random day, on Jamie's days, there's thousands of people who are all dealing with multiple issues. Right, the trans reality is one of mine, and I think that it should just be an exchange of common courtesy. That when I'm sitting on Jameson Hall, I'm able to look, I'm able to approach somebody who has a physical disability as a human, to engage with them as a human, and to build a relationship, an authentic relationship with them as a human, and get to know them on that level, that kind of even transcends, their disability. And in turn, I would like them to look at me as a human being, to put themselves within my shoes and to try and to try and digest and engage with every single aspect of my life, including being trans, including being black, including being working class. And I think with that, then we'd actually reach a level of a meaningful, understanding of one another, and without even develop into meaningful relationships with one another. And I think that's where transformation lies.